It was on battery.
Okay.
I think we'll keep this slightly open so that we don't get too much rain.
Okay, I'm Joan Walton from Liverpool Hope University, and I'm just going to be talking about one of my experiences in inclusive education at Liverpool Hope. So the initiating research question was, as a new lecturer in inclusive education, how do I improve my practice as a research-informed teacher seeking to enhance the learning of students? And I think it's just important to say a little bit about my professional background, because I initially qualified as a social worker, and so I'm not new to action research at all. In my placement in the 1970s, I did my practical placement in Rostov as an action research project, and very much like Judy Marshall, see my life as an inquiry. So really, I can, in a sense, feel I live and breathe action research. So coming to the university, I think I assumed it would be more integrated within the curriculum than it turned out to be. And also, I have in my past history been a lecturer on the social work professional qualifying course. My professional life has been about the professional development of people in the health and care sector, but also in terms with managers and leaders in corporate organisations. So I've got a long history of professional development in an adult context. But I realised when I came to the university that it was all about people who were already in work, so it was helping them reflect on and think about their practice and apply their theory to practice. So in that respect, I'm really interested or taken with Boyer's model of scholarship. And Boyer was a professor in America who was being critical of the idea of the relationship between scholarship and research, thought scholarship should be much more than research, and that equal to research should be teaching, it should be application to practice, so relating the theory and the learning to practice, and integration of, across disciplines, across professions, just integrating the teaching, research, application. I just believe in kind of everything I do, looking at how you can integrate across traditional boundaries. So I came with this idea that, should be developing Boyer's model of scholarship in what I would do. And Donald Shern in 1995 basically said that this new scholarship of Boyer's could only be developed through using a form of action research, that it required a new epistemology, and that this would come through action research. So there's action research. It's the most simplistic, cyclical process of reflecting, planning, acting, observing, reflecting, and then replanning. In his conception, in Boyer's conception, the idea of application means generation of knowledge for and from action. And in the module I'm going to be talking about, it's about second-year undergraduate students doing a module in inclusive education who haven't had any practice experience before. In fact, most of them had applied for a teacher training qualification and haven't been successful, so by default they get put onto an inclusive education programme, a completely theoretical programme. So now I'm being asked to work with them on a theoretical level, not relating it to practice. And I just found that this is going to be really difficult, especially if we're looking at this idea of Boyer's notion of scholarship. So in my work and in my action research using Jack's model of living theory, which in a very kind of straightforward manner starts off with what really matters to me, what do I feel passionately about, what are my values and why, what is my concern and why, and what can I do about it. So in approaching this module, I was using this kind of model of action research. So in looking at what really mattered to me, in this particular context, it was about improving my practice in research-informed teaching, encouraging student voice through developing students as researchers, and supporting the development of student groups as a community of practice. And these were reflecting the values that I have, which again in this context were about respect, participation, mutual empowerment. Respect for each student as an individual and the kind of experiences they were bringing to that learning context, encouraging their participation through the idea of student voice, and then mutual empowerment. That's really important, because you might have the principle of participation, but people or students may not have the skills or experience in which to participate, so they may not have the confidence. So I always see it as really important that if you're going to believe in the value of participation, you need also to support people to have the confidence and skills to participate and be aware of that in any learning context. So what was my concern? I was asked to teach a module on active participation in learning. I'm not quite sure why I put the word asked in there. Perhaps it just looks better in a printout. I think the actual word was I was told to teach a module in active participation. I didn't have any choice about it. And that again was rather alien for me. I can't remember last time in a professional context that I've actually been told to do something without any kind of negotiation or discussion about it. So I kind of felt taken back to my school days when we were instructed, which was quite an odd feeling. I had no experience in teaching this module. My teaching experience had been, you know, in an FE context, in a HE context, was in professional qualification of social workers. So it wasn't in an education faculty, and I hadn't done anything in inclusive education. When I looked at the curriculum that set out to me, it was just very alien. It was about, you know, in school, encouraging pupils to be actively involved. I'm not a school teacher, I've never taught in schools, and here I was being asked to engage pupils in this context. So I didn't have a knowledge base that fitted the module that I was being asked to teach. I then looked to see what the students' experience of the previous year had been. Well, one of the students that was in my group was a repeat student from the previous year, so when I asked him, he said, I don't know, we spent the first half complaining about the previous year and the second half of the module complaining, you know, moaning about what was going on that year. I haven't got a clue what we did, and it didn't make much meaning, so that wasn't a lot of help. And the previous lecturer who had designed the module was no longer at the university, so I had absolutely nowhere to go. So why was I concerned? Well, I panicked actually. You know, I just went into some kind of autopilot and this panic and thought, oh, I'm going to have to do a lot of reading and I'm going to have to write stuff together and then I'm going to have to give it to the students. And I thought, hang on a minute, you know, talk about this being against your value base, you know, wouldn't be research informed, it would not be engaging them as active researchers, and really, if I were to do that, not only I, but the students would have a meaningless experience. So, oh, is that next door? Sorry, I think it's coming off my laptop. I started a video. And so really, I don't know if anybody's come across Angela Brew, and she's in Australia, Professor of Teaching and Learning, was at Sydney University, now at Macquarie, and if anybody is interested in teaching and learning, I think she's a really excellent person to consult. But this is the kind of old model of teaching and learning, and knowledge generation and research is in the one half and the teaching is in the other. So I wanted to avoid that. So what I did was acknowledged, you know, where I'd been going to was Jack's version of a living contradiction. You know, there were my values of participation and mutual empowerment, and actually I was being drawn into a transmission mode of teaching, and I absolutely knew that I didn't want to do that. So I thought, what can I do? I want to participate, but I haven't a clue what I'm doing with it. So actually, I was just fairly straight with him. On the first day, I just said, listen, and I will, you know, what do you do when you're in a corner? Say it as it is. And I said, I'm new here, I'm not new. Basically what I said to you, I was just pretty open. And I was very fortunate because this module was active participation and learning. Actually, you can't have much better a module title for encouraging participation, can you? So I said, how about we learn together through you know, participating in our own learning, and why don't we just collaboratively write the curriculum together? Now, I did put some baseline content in there. I put in some information about learning theory, Kolb's learning cycle, reflective practice, those kind of stuff around you know, learning and what it is to be a reflective practitioner. But then I said, you know, what would you like to do? And in a sense, I was trying to encourage them to be researchers also. So again, I took this idea of a living theory approach to action research and saying to them, what really matters to you? What do you feel passionate about? What are you interested in? What would you like to learn? And what evolved out of that is that some of them actually decided to go and do placements, because I was saying I find it's quite a challenge doing this theoretically, and it is a lot better if we can relate it to practice. So some of them went out voluntarily to get placements, and we were able to use that experience in the module. But what they all agreed to was that each of them would take responsibility for a session. so that they would take something that they enjoyed and meant something, mattered to them. And I said it doesn't need to be necessarily part of your curriculum. It could be something you're interested in doing in later life, you'd like to explore a little bit more about, you'd like to learn about. So you go away and plan a session, and then you present it to the rest of the group in a way that encourages their active participation. Well, you know, they were really excited about that. I'll show later of the initial dialogue on Moodle, because I was encouraging feedback on this. I knew this was a bit of a scary thing to do for me and for them, and you know, they were actually saying this feels scary but exciting. We haven't had the opportunity to do this before. So that was what they did. They went away and they each planned a session for themselves. So these are just some of the sessions. Huey there, who was probably the oldest student, he was the one who'd done a bit of work experience, was very interested in the concept of forest schools. So he decided he was going to find out a little bit more about that. And his chosen subject at that point was, we've got a really nice campus at Liverpool Hope University. It's a very aesthetic in terms of the Vice-Chancellor sees the gardens, etc., as being very important. So Huey decided to go around and do a lot of research about the different trees and etc. And what he did was then took us on a kind of guided tour of them, and I ended up with knowledge about trees that I've never had in my life before. And there's one of the students kind of pointing out something in relation to what we had been talking around. Another of the students decided that she was going to do some learning through creative play and development, and looking at the effects of music therapy on SEN. And just to give some of the kinds of examples of what they did as a rationale, she did this. I chose this because I have a family member that's been diagnosed with having Asperger's syndrome. As I was the only one in the class to be doing disability studies as my combined honours degree, I thought it was a good idea to explore Asperger's syndrome and make the class more aware of it. In disability studies, we've recently explored different therapies to help engage people with learning difficulties. And she had a range of different activities with us that involved us, but just to give you a sense of the kind of activity she was doing. It's time to get messy. So if this plays, which I'm hoping it does, this is a group of students. That's Catherine, who's doing the session at the back. She's been through a PowerPoint. She's done quite a lot of theoretical input. And now she's got some kind of icing stuff at the table and just got the music playing and encouraging people to identify what's going on for them, what they're feeling, to taste it and do the whole lot. And they just, you know, they're having a great time. So that's that really. Gives you a bit of a sense of where they're at. A lot of laughter. In the same session, she had another exercise, was she arranged for a lot of different musical instruments, and she just had people playing these, you know, the triangles and drums and cymbals, and just playing them as and when to express their feelings in the mood. And this is the kind of work that she would do with the children she worked with. She had gone into a placement. She was one of the ones who'd found herself a placement. So, how did I evaluate the educational influences of my actions? The quality of work produced by the students. I mean, there were some very interesting ones. There was one guy, in fact, it was the guy who'd repeated from the previous year, and he was, we were talking about bipolar a moment or two ago, he was bipolar. But actually he was a very quiet member of the group, and no one had really got to know him that well. And when he came to do his session, what he did, he started off with a guitar.